Hello. Today we set out to explore the fascinating science behind one of humanity's most fundamental senses, the language of sound. Spreading in waves, invisible yet constantly surrounding us, sound is not only our means of communication, it is also one of nature's deepest mysteries. A sound is born as a vibration, travels through the air, and becomes a meaningful experience in our brain. This journey stands at the intersection of physics, biology, and culture. From antiquity to the present day, people have tried to understand the mystery of sound, from music to worship. From echoes in nature to modern technologies, sound has played a powerful role at every stage of human history. So what does the science behind sound tell us? And how do these invisible waves shape our lives? Definition of sound: a journey that begins with vibration. Sound is one of the most fundamental physical phenomena that helps us perceive our surroundings. It appears in almost every aspect of life. In our conversations, in music, in alarm systems, in animal calls in nature. Yet, despite its familiarity, sound is often something we experience automatically, without thinking about it. From a scientific perspective, however, sound is a form of mechanical energy that begins with the vibration of a source and propagates as waves through a medium. To produce a sound, there must first be a vibrating source. This may be a guitar string, a human voice, a running engine, or a leaf shaken by the wind. The vibration at the source causes the particles in the medium, often air molecules, to compress and rarefy. This pattern of compression and expansion spreads through the environment in the form of a wave. However, for this wave to be transmitted, a carrier medium made of particles is required. That is why sound cannot travel in a vacuum. The reason you cannot scream in space is precisely this. If there is no carrier for the sound, no wave is formed. Sound waves are described as longitudinal waves. In other words, the particles of the medium move back and forth in the same direction as the direction of propagation. During this movement, energy is transferred from one molecule to the next. For example, when we speak, our vocal cords vibrate, and this vibration affects the air molecules, allowing sound waves to spread through the environment. What creates sound is the motion of matter. But this motion carries energy, not matter itself. The speed of sound depends on the density and temperature of the medium. In air at a temperature of 20 degrees Celsius, the average speed of sound is about 343 meters per second. In denser media, such as water, this speed increases. In water, for instance, sound travels at about 1,480 meters per second. In solids, where molecules are more tightly packed, sound can move much faster, exceeding 5,000 meters per second in steel. This difference is not just a curious physical detail, it has important consequences in many fields, from engineering to medicine, from music to military technology. For example, ultrasound devices use high-frequency sound waves passing through the body to visualize internal structures. In underwater communication, The fact that sound travels faster in water is used as an advantage. In short, sound is not only a stimulus that we hear. It is a multi-layered phenomenon that can be calculated physically, used in engineering, and evaluated in terms of its psychological effects. This journey that begins with vibration is carried not only by waves, but also by meaning. Types of waves: mechanical, longitudinal, and transverse. To understand the nature of sound, we must first understand the types of waves that constitute it. Sound is not only a form of energy, it is also a wave phenomenon that moves according to specific physical rules. A wave is an oscillatory motion that carries energy through a medium. This motion determines how fast sound travels, under which conditions it propagates, and how it is perceived. Wave types are mainly classified according to two criteria: whether they require a medium, mechanical or electromagnetic waves, the direction in which the particles move, longitudinal or transverse waves. In this classification, sound occupies a special place because it is both a mechanical wave and a longitudinal wave. Mechanical waves. Waves dependent on a medium. Mechanical waves are waves that require a medium in order to propagate. This medium may be a gas, a liquid, or a solid. Sound is one of the primary examples of such waves, because the vibrations that create sound can only be transmitted through a material structure via molecules. For this reason, sound waves do not propagate in a vacuum, because there is no molecular chain to sustain the transfer of sound. Water waves, seismic waves, and vibrations on a stretched spring are also examples of mechanical waves. These waves behave differently depending on the elasticity and density of the material. Longitudinal waves, compression and rarefaction. The specific wave type to which sound belongs is the longitudinal wave. In these waves, the particles of the medium vibrate in the same direction as the propagation. A particle moves back and forth and transfers energy to its neighbor. The regions of compression and rarefaction that arise from this interaction enable the propagation of sound. Although this process takes place on a microscopic scale, the graphical representation of sound waves uses these compression-rarefaction cycles. Sound traveling in air follows exactly this logic. Transverse waves, up and down oscillations. Although sound is not a transverse waves are one of the basic references for understanding waves in general. In transverse waves, the vibration of the particles is perpendicular to the direction of propagation. For example, the wave produced when you move one end of a rope up and down is a transverse wave. Light and electromagnetic waves also belong to this group. The fact that sound is longitudinal and not transverse explains why it can only move within a carrying medium. This property also determines how sound is directed, how it echoes, and how it refracts when it encounters obstacles. The role of wave types in acoustics. The fact that sound is not only a frequency, but also a particular type of wave makes it a powerful tool in many disciplines, from architecture to engineering. In concert halls, the way sound spreads is planned according to how the materials used respond to these wave types. For noise insulation, the extent to which materials absorb or reflect sound waves is tested. In ultrasound devices used in medicine, the longitudinal nature of sound causes it to refract or reflect differently in different tissues of the body. Therefore, understanding wave types is not merely acquiring physical knowledge. It also means being able to predict the behavior of sound. Properties of sound: frequency, amplitude, and speed. Sound waves do not merely exist. They also possess measurable and definable properties. These properties determine how a sound is heard, whether it is perceived as high or low in pitch, and how intense it feels. Three basic parameters in particular help us understand the physical character of sound: frequency, amplitude, and speed. Frequency expresses the number of oscillations a sound wave makes per second and is measured in hertz. High-frequency sounds are perceived as high-pitched, whereas low-frequency sounds are perceived as low-pitched. For example, the buzz of a mosquito is around 4,000 hertz, while a drum may fall below 100 hertz. The human ear can usually hear sounds between 20 hertz and 20,000 hertz. Sounds below this range are called infrasound. Those above are called ultrasound. Animals such as dolphins, dogs, and bats can hear frequencies that humans cannot perceive. Amplitude indicates the amount of energy carried by the wave. Simply put, the loudness or intensity of a sound is related to its amplitude. A wave with a high amplitude carries more energy and is perceived as louder. The ear perceives sounds above a certain threshold as disturbing or harmful. Prolonged exposure to sounds above about 85 decibels may lead to hearing loss. For this reason, ear protection is recommended in highly noisy environments such as concert venues, construction sites, machinery halls, and airports. The speed of sound describes how fast it propagates within a medium. This speed depends on the density, temperature, and elasticity of the medium. In air, at 20 degrees Celsius, the speed of sound is about 343 meters per second. In water, however, it rises to around 480 meters per second, and in steel, it can exceed 5,000 meters per second. The denser and more tightly bound the molecules are, the faster sound is transmitted. This property is critical for engineering, underwater communication, and medical imaging techniques based on sound waves. These three basic properties, frequency, amplitude, and speed, together form the physical definition of a sound. Yet this definition covers only its external characteristics. How sound is perceived by human beings and what kind of emotional or cognitive impact it creates belong to the next layers of the topic. The hearing process. The journey of sound from ear to brain. Sound waves propagate through the air as a physical form of energy, but the transformation of these vibrations into a meaningful experience is the result of a complex biological and neural process. The human auditory system is a highly sensitive collection of systems that capture sound waves, transmit them to the brain, and enable them to be interpreted. This process unfolds both on a physical and a neurological level. Hearing begins in the outer ear. The pinna collects the sound waves spreading in the environment and directs them into the ear canal. When these waves strike the eardrum, it begins to vibrate. This vibration is transmitted to the inner ear via 3 small bones in the middle ear: the malleus, hammer, incus, anvil, and stapes, stirrup. These bones play a crucial role in converting mechanical vibration into hydraulic motion. The cochlea in the inner ear, a spiral structure filled with fluid, produces vibrations at different regions according to the frequency of the sound. The hair cells within this structure convert the movement of the fluid into electrical signals. These signals are transmitted to the brain via the auditory nerve. In the brain, they are first processed in the auditory nuclei and then analyzed in a specialized region called the auditory cortex. This analysis includes not only the recognition of sound, but also its direction, distance, and content. The hearing process is not merely a physical transformation. The brain integrates incoming sound signals with memory, language, emotion, and attention, thereby giving them meaning. For example, a familiar voice carries much more than frequency information. It is evaluated together with social context, emotional reaction, and past experience. The same word spoken by a mother to her child and by a stranger follows a similar path in the auditory system, yet its counterpart in the brain is completely different. At this stage, mental factors such as attention, prioritization, and habit also come into play. The ear transmits the sound, but the organ that truly hears is the brain. This distinction explains the difference between hearing impairment and auditory perception disorders. The ear may be healthy, but if the brain cannot interpret the sound, perception is still impaired. The auditory system begins to develop even before birth and remains one of the fundamental means through which we connect with the world throughout our life. When we listen to music, learn a language, or detect danger, we rely on the efficient functioning of this system. Perception and meaning. Sound in the brain. The auditory system receives sound as a physical wave and transmits it to the brain. What happens afterwards, however, is not simply that the sound is heard. The brain interprets the incoming data and assigns meaning to it. This is the process of perception and interpretation, and it transforms the experience of sound into something personal, cultural, and emotional. Perception is the representation of an external stimulus in the brain via the senses. In the case of sound, this means the brain's interpretation of physical properties such as frequency, amplitude, direction, duration, and timbre. Yet, not everyone responds to the same physical stimulus in the same way. This shows that perception is not only biological, but also depends on mental and environmental conditions. While the auditory cortex analyzes incoming sound signals by breaking them down into components and determining from which region which frequency originates, this is only the first step. Echo, background noise, and attention are also taken into account. Recognition of sound, however, requires the involvement of other regions, the limbic system, memory centers, and the prefrontal cortex. To illustrate with an example, the same word can carry different meanings depending on how it is spoken. The phrase, "come here," spoken softly by a mother to her child, may convey trust and intimacy, whereas, said in a harsh tone, it may convey a message of threat or discipline. This is clear evidence that sound acquires social and emotional content beyond its physical properties. The brain also forms auditory expectations, predicting the next note in a familiar piece of music or completing a distorted word from context, are products of these expectations. Even when the incoming data are incomplete or noisy, the brain tries to complete them and create a coherent meaning. This property maintains the continuity of communication and makes auditory perception more flexible. Past experiences, language, cultural background, and psychological state all play a role in this process. The same sound may evoke nostalgia in one person and anxiety or unease in another. Thus, the perception of sound in the brain features both universal and personal dimensions. Noise and silence, environmental impacts and health. The influence of sound in our lives is not limited to pleasant music or meaningful conversations. The disturbing, continuous, irregular, and high-intensity form of sound is defined as noise, and it is one of the most common environmental stressors of modern life. Noise affects not only our sense of hearing, but also our general health, cognitive functions, and psychological balance. The World Health Organization recognizes noise pollution as a serious threat to public health. Prolonged exposure to high levels of noise can lead to hearing loss, while even lower levels can cause sleep disturbances, increased stress, difficulty concentrating, and a rise in cardiovascular diseases. In urban life, continuous background noise created by traffic, construction, industry, and crowded places becomes a stress factor to which individuals are exposed, often without realizing it. Sensitivity to noise varies among individuals. Some people can tolerate a certain decibel level, while others find the same level highly disturbing. This is related to factors such as neurophysiology, sensory sensitivity, and psychological state. Children, elderly people, and individuals with chronic illnesses are more vulnerable to the harmful effects of noise. Opposite to noise, silence represents a different kind of power. Silence is not only the absence of sound, it is also an opportunity for mental relaxation and focus. Studies show that regular exposure to silence can lower cortisol levels, enhance creativity, and contribute to neural regeneration. In this sense, silence is not a passive state, but an active space for mental recovery. However, absolute silence is not a natural condition for humans. In completely soundproof rooms, for example, people begin to hear their own heartbeat, the flow in their blood vessels, and even the functioning of the nervous system. This may cause discomfort, unease, and even panic in some individuals. Therefore, the balance between sound and silence is important, both physiologically and psychologically. In modern architecture, urban planning and ergonomic design, acoustic regulation is gaining increasing importance. Controlling noise and creating quiet zones are not only matters of comfort, but also essential for public health. Music and the mind. The role of sound in emotion. The most aesthetic and emotional form of sound is music. Music is not simply an arrangement of frequencies. It also evokes memories, triggers emotions, and affects cognitive processes in the human mind. It is one of the rare tools that simultaneously activates both the rational and emotional areas of the brain. For this reason, music exerts powerful influence at both individual and collective levels. The effects of music on the brain are multi-layered. Rhythmic structures activate the motor cortex. Melody and harmony are processed in the auditory cortex. And lyrical music is additionally interpreted by language centers. Beyond this, music also affects emotional centers. The limbic system and the amygdala in particular respond to different kinds of music with specific emotional reactions. A sad melody may evoke melancholy, while a fast ascending rhythm may increase enthusiasm and motivation. The reason music is often described as a universal language lies in its ability to create emotional bonds that transcend cultural boundaries. Similar musical structures can evoke similar emotional responses in very different regions of the world. This shows that music is not only a learned aesthetic form, but also a biologically grounded experience. Neuroscientific research has shown that listening to music increases dopamine release in the brain. This confirms that music activates the reward system and provides a pleasurable experience. In neurological disorders such as Alzheimer's and Parkinson's disease, music therapy can support motor functions and help recall memories. Music also plays a major role in education, therapy, and social communication. From lullabies sung to infants to anthems used to build collective identity, music is present at every stage of human life. Because of its strong effects on emotion, music is not only an art form, but also a subject of research in psychology, neuroscience, and sociology. Sound technologies. From microphones to bionic ears, the recording, transmission, processing, and reproduction of sound have taken on an entirely new dimension with the development of technology. Today, sound is not only a wave, it is also a digital data stream, a design tool, and even a medical solution. From microphones to loudspeakers, from sound insulation materials to hearing implants, many technologies enable sound to be controlled and harnessed. Microphones are devices that convert sound waves into electrical signals. Thanks to this conversion, sound can be recorded, transmitted, or transferred into the digital environment. Dynamic, condenser, and piezoelectric microphones are chosen according to the intensity of the sound, the environment, and the purpose of use. Through these systems, speech, music, natural sounds, and environmental noise can be documented and analyzed. Loudspeakers perform the reverse process. They convert electrical signals back into sound waves, making them audible. These systems are the foundation of cinema, radio, telephony, and concert technology. They allow sound to be shared collectively and directionally. Acoustic engineering enters here in order to improve sound quality and optimize room acoustics. For individuals with hearing loss, hearing aids and cochlear implants are among the most important applications of sound technology in medicine. Conventional hearing aids amplify sounds from the environment and transmit them into the ear, while cochlear implants stimulate the auditory nerve directly. These technologies represent some of the most striking contributions of neurotechnology to sound perception. Technologies used in sound insulation and acoustic design aim to reduce noise pollution and create controlled sound environments. In studios, offices, classrooms, and open-plan workspaces, special materials and design techniques are used to prevent echo and enhance speech intelligibility. Today, sound is not only an output, it is also an interface. Voice assistants and voice-controlled devices make human-machine interaction more natural. Applications such as Siri, Alexa, and Google Assistant are systems that use sound both as data and as a command. All of these developments show that sound is no longer just a phenomenon to be heard, but also something that can be shaped, recorded, and reproduced, a full-fledged technological field. Acoustic illusions, when the brain is tricked. The auditory system is extremely sensitive and powerful, yet it is not flawless. Sometimes the brain misinterprets the sound signals it receives, or it may perceive sounds as present even when they do not exist. This phenomenon is called an acoustic illusion. Although not as widely known as visual illusions, auditory illusions offer important clues about how the brain processes sound. Acoustic illusions often arise when the brain tries to complete incomplete or ambiguous auditory information. For example, even if the middle of a spoken word is masked by noise, the brain can automatically fill in the missing part from context. This is known as phonemic restoration, and demonstrates how active a process auditory perception really is. Another example is the shepherd tone. In this illusion, the listener hears a sound that seems to rise or fall endlessly in pitch, even though the sound is actually in a circular loop. The pitch never truly increases, but the brain believes that it does. In music theory and film scoring, this technique is used to create a feeling of ongoing tension. The McGurk effect is a striking demonstration of how sound is combined with visual information. If a person's lips appear to form the sound ba, while the audio track plays da, the viewer often reports hearing ga. This shows that the brain uses an integrative interpretation system across different senses, and that visual information can alter auditory perception. Tonal illusions are another form of acoustic deception. In Deutsch's melodic illusions, for example, when different frequencies are presented to the right and left ears, the brain tries to reorganize them into meaningful melodies. This indicates that the brain perceives sound not only as a physical wave, but also as a pattern. Such illusions reveal that the brain is constantly engaged in prediction and modeling, while interpreting auditory data. The brain does not merely analyze incoming information, it reshapes it according to past experience, context, and expectation. Acoustic illusions are not only of interest to neuroscience, they are also used to manipulate perception in music, cinema, advertising, and game design. Thus, sound becomes not only a carrier of information, but also a tool of perceptual design. The sound of the future. Synthetic voices, interfaces, and a vocal world. As technology advances, the very definition of sound is changing. Once produced solely by natural vibrations, sound is now generated by software, modeled by artificial intelligence, and processed by digital systems. This transformation affects not only the way sound is produced, but also human-machine interaction, patterns of communication, and even forms of social life. The sound of the future will be something not only heard but also programmed, personalized, and made interactive. Synthetic sound technologies have made great progress in both speech synthesis and speech recognition. Today, a computer can generate speech remarkably close to a human voice. In the same way, a machine can recognize human voices, understand spoken commands, and respond appropriately. These capabilities form the basis of systems such as voice assistants. These technologies are not only about comfort, they are also crucial for accessibility. Text-to-speech systems for the visually impaired and speech generation devices for people who cannot speak enable independent and equal access to digital information. For aging populations, voice interfaces make complex technologies easier to use. Bionic ears, neurotechnological implants, and neural sound interfaces allow individuals with hearing loss to experience sound at the level of the nervous system. As these technologies evolve, the future may bring us systems in which sound is not only heard, but processed directly by the brain. Artificial intelligence-driven voices are no longer limited to conveying information. They are now incorporating emotional tone, emphasis, and context-sensitive responses. This enables machines to use human language in a more natural way and to form more engaging relations with users. At this point, ethical questions arise. How important will the difference between real and synthetic voices be? Where and how should artificially generated speech be used? In the future, voice interfaces are expected to become widespread in smart home systems, in-vehicle systems, educational platforms, and therapeutic applications. Writing is gradually being replaced in many contexts by speaking. This is not merely a technological change. It represents the reshaping of communication culture. Sound is no longer only a stimulus coming in from the outside world. It is becoming a command sent from inside, a response, and increasingly a way of being present in the world. Today, we have seen that sound is not merely a physical vibration, but a multi-layered phenomenon that shapes our emotions, our culture, our technology, and our future. From the vibration of a guitar string to the feelings evoked by a melody in our brain. From microphones to bionic ears, from illusions to artificial intelligence-generated voices, the journey of sound carries us to the boundaries of both science and art. Sound is not only a reality we hear, it is the memory of humanity, the language of emotion, and the technological interface of the future. And perhaps most importantly, even in silence, we carry the trace of sound. Because life begins with vibrations and continues with vibrations.